welcome to the Hallmark podcast. And we are really excited today. We are here to talk about two of the movies that premiered this weekend for the first weekend of Hallmark Countdown to Christmas and The Miracles of Christmas. And that's always very exciting. We get our first weekend of Christmas movies. And I'm film critic Rachel Wagner. And today I have a very special guest. We have podcaster and composer David Rosen here. And he actually wrote the jingle for our theme music for the regular part of the year, not our Christmas music. But David, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me back on.
Yeah. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do on your podcast and in your career.
Yeah. So on my podcast, Piecing It Together, we take a look at movies through the lens of what other movies might have inspired it. And Rachel's been on the show before, but we've been doing it for about 5 years, and each episode is a way to look at a movie in a kind of different way and make these connections to other movies that have come before that deal with similar themes and ideas and stuff like that. And it's a fun, different way to talk about movies. And of course, I also compose music. I score films. I make music for podcasts. I also put out albums of instrumental music. And I actually have a new one coming out at the end of the year called More Content. And yeah, that's me.
That's great. So how did you get started in your career as a composer?
I was basically, I mean, first of all, I love film and I love film scores. So, I mean, it's kind of a natural thing. But at the same time, I also had no interest in joining a band or anything like that. I just wanted to make music. And like, you can make music and then just like listen to it in your car. But I wanted to make music that people would actually hear. And since I wasn't in a band going and like playing and doing shows and stuff like that, it makes so much sense to be a part of movies and to make the music that plays in films. And it's just, one thing led to another. And I started, doing little short films for friends and recommendations from there. And I've been at it for like 15 plus years now.
Wow, that's incredible. What's your process for taking a scene and being like, okay, this is the music that needs to go along with this scene?
I start out watching it just by itself without any music, which, as you could imagine, can sometimes be pretty dull, especially since the movies are usually not even finished. So it's like no music and not even finished. But I watch it, just kind of make very rough notes of like, oh, this needs to be scary. This needs to be mysterious. This needs to be funny, just very rough outline kind of notes. And then I just sit down and start making music, and hopefully it fits. And usually it does. And if it doesn't, I start that scene over until it does. And so I keep making music until everything feels like it's coming together in a way that just absolutely makes sense and feels like it was always kind of meant to be together.
How do you know what instrument fits in a particular moment? Like, should we have piano here or violin or how do you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's some amount of experience involved in that where, like, I know what has worked in the past and, what I've heard in films, because obviously, there's going to be some influence from things I've watched and heard in the past. That's what we talk about on my podcast all the time. But part of it also because I'm not like a classically trained musician, even though I've been doing it for so long, it's kind of almost entirely self taught. So a lot
Mhm.
is kind of just trial and error. And I shouldn't say trial and error because like I know what I'm doing when I go to sit down. It's not like I'm just like, figuring something out from scratch, but knowing like specific what kind of instruments evoke certain moods or what kind of styles will kind of fit into a scene based on the kind of movie that it is. And so I at least have some ideas to go off of, but then from that point forward, jumping into the actual writing of the music, at that point it's just kind of figuring things out.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I've actually had the chance to interview a number of composers, and I think it's just really fascinating to the process of creating a theme for a character, the way you
Hmm.
work with the filmmakers. It's an interesting process.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different ways to do it. Like every project is just different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by W Rated, the podcast where we willingly watch the world's worst rated movies. Join me, Daisy.
And me, Claire, as we break down the IMDb Bottom 100, choosing a different film from the list every episode.
We take a deep dive into the plot, production, release, and reviews, usually with a special guest, to uncover if these films are truly as bad as everyone says they are.
You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, and anywhere else you find your podcasts.
How do you feel about like rom-coms in general, Christmas movies in general? I think I was throwing you a little outside your comfort zone, inviting you to watch these Hallmark movies.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I like rom-coms as much as anybody. You know, I like plenty of rom-coms over, you know, the history of me watching movies. There's lots of them that I've liked, but Christmas movies are really kind of outside of my zone. Like, you know, there's some classics that I remember watching a lot, you know, growing up, you know, all the usual for people who grew up in the 80s, but just not really my genre, you know? And it's not that I don't like them, it's just not something that I watch very often. And I guess I could kind of say that about rom-coms as well, even though, you know, I watch plenty. I mean, we talked about the J-Lo one earlier this year, Marry Me, you know, like there's you know, there's always good rom-coms every year. It's just not the genre that I kind of gravitate towards.
Would you say that you have both a favorite Christmas movie and a favorite rom-com? That's
I I would say Scrooged probably for Christmas movie, but,
uh
like, at the same time, I haven't seen it in so many years. I was actually thinking maybe this will be the year I finally rewatch it, but it's been, like, 20 years or something since I've seen it.
So you don't
But
have those like regular every year. I
exactly.
I watch these Christmas movies.
Not even Die Hard. Like, I don't have a regular like, and sometimes like, I think last year or the year before we watched Home Alone, you know, like, it just randomly happened, like, "Hey, it's Christmas, let's watch Home Alone," but, like, no, I don't have, like, a tradition of doing something like that.
Hmm. Well, it's going to be fun to see what you thought, kind of get an outsider perspective on these
Sure.
movies. So we picked for you, we're talking about A Kismet Christmas, which aired on Sunday. Well, actually, both of them air on Sunday. Anyway, we had two movies that we're talking about today. We're talking about Kismet Christmas, which was on the Hallmark Channel, and we have We Need a Little Christmas, which was on Hallmark Movies and Mysteries. Is this the like first Hallmark movies you've ever seen?
I'm sure I've seen a few. My wife and I, we watch a lot of, Lifetime, like, thrillers, and,
Okay.
we laugh our way through them, and I'm sure some of that has spilled over to Hallmark, you know, just regular type movies, you know, but yeah, no, certainly not, Christmas ones.
Hmm. Very interesting. All right. Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about A Kismet Christmas. This stars Sarah Ramos, Carlo Marx, and Mary Lou Henner, who we're big fans of here on this podcast. Mary Lou Henner, so nice. Directed by Mark Jean, writer Betsy Morris. And the summary is it tells the story of Sarah, a children's book author who returns to her hometown where she reconnects with her family and her teenage crush. She soon discovers that a family legend might actually be true. I don't feel like that's the best summary, but nevertheless, I was very pleasantly surprised by this movie because Hallmark doesn't really do Christmas magic. I think a lot of people think that, oh, you're going to have Santa and North Pole and stuff like that all over the place on Hallmark movies. Almost never. And this isn't that, but it was kind of magical realism, I guess you might say.
Sure.
And I found that very refreshing as a as a Hallmark viewer and Hallmark movie viewer, that they just kind of went with the magic on this one, and I really enjoyed that, these magic cookies.
Yeah.
And I really thought the cast was great. I hadn't seen this Sarah Ramos in anything except for, I guess she was on Parenthood for a long time, but I thought she was great. I really enjoyed her. And Carlo Marx is very dependable. He is very, just sweet and dreamy and, and
Yeah.
great. Uh, so I like that. Of course, I love Mary Lou Hanner. Yeah, overall did you think about it?
Well, I mean, spoiler alert for the other one, but this was definitely my favorite of the two.
Uh-huh.
I thought that, yeah, like you were saying, the magical realism aspect of it really kind of made it stand out and made it a lot more fun. It
Yeah.
was like it was more of a movie, and if you're going to watch one of these kind of movies, I would definitely prefer it to be a movie. You think about all the Christmas classics like Scrooge, like I mentioned earlier, and things like that. Like you want some of that magical realism, or else it's like, it's just a plain old romance basically set at Christmas.
I think that, yeah, I completely agree. I think that it started out a little rough, like the backstory and the way they tried to make these two actors look young
Oh boy. Yeah.
was rough. I wish they had just had different actors playing them young, because like her in these like really weird pigtails and like I don't know, it just wasn't. And he's got
Yeah.
like the hat on backwards and like no.
It
These
was also funny that he calls her Bear because that's my name for my wife.
Oh
We
really?
call each other Bear, so I was laughing at that. But yeah, those flashback scenes are absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know. It kind of added to it though. It felt like this movie. My only knowledge of these two movies that we just watched, but this one didn't take itself so seriously.
Yes.
And that adds to the fun of it. I feel like.
Well, and part of that is that on the Hallmark Channel, there are more romantic comedies, whereas on Hallmark Movies and Mysteries, they're more supposed to be dramas.
Hmm.
So part of that is I gave you a drama. I
Yeah.
probably should have warned you. So, and it can be sort of distracting when every once in a while they'll put a comedy on Movies and Mysteries or a drama on Hallmark Channel, and it can be like you're just not prepared. Like you're going to expecting a particular movie, and then they give you something different.
Sure.
So it's actually pretty important that they put the right movie on the right channel for the
Right.
audience.
Yeah, I could imagine that would
Mhm.
definitely get a little confusing otherwise. But
Yeah.
before we continue, I do have to ask you. So I'm Jewish, and
Uh-huh.
is there a mythos around Kismet cookies being magical, or is that completely made up for this movie? I had no idea.
It's just, as far as I know, it's just for this movie. I never heard of it before.
Okay.
So I'd have to talk to the writer and see
Mhm.
if there was some, lore behind
Yeah.
it, which I'd love to do if the writer wants to come on the podcast. We'd love to talk to her. Betsy Morris. I had never heard of Kismet cookies before.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't even know if it was a kind of cookie, let alone magical,
Yeah.
So I was like going into this like I want a Kismet cookie. That sounds good.
Although it could be riskier.
Yeah, that's true. Who knows what it'll end up doing, but yeah.
You and your wife might hope you dream of each other. That would be
Yeah. I'm
awkward.
sure. I'm sure.
I'm just looking, I'm Googling to see if there is a recipe online for Christmas Kismet cookies.
I wonder what
I'm
makes a
looking.
Kismet cookie different from other cookies. Like what is the standout flavor?
Let's just say I'm looking online, and a beloved friend gave me this recipe. She gave the little story of making these on Christmas Eve to put under your pillow so that you dream of your destiny, your one true love.
So it is real.
It is real. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Like the internet is and they look pretty good. I didn't think the
Wow.
cookies looked that good.
No, they were just plain cookies, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one thing. I was like, I don't know. You would think that a Kismet cookie, you would want it to be like just like, I don't know, like a pull apart chocolate chip cookie with the chocolate dripping. Just something like really like And this
Right.
just kind of looked, I don't know, just looked normal.
However, though, if you're going to be putting this cookie under your pillow, you kind of don't want there, to make a
No, that's
mess.
true.
You don't want it to smear on your pillow sheets and, all that stuff.
So I guess the ancestors knew what they were doing
Yeah. Yeah.
with this recipe.
Yeah.
But it starts out the movie where she is a fantasy writer. And she's supposed to write a book about this in her fantasy world about these Kismet cookies, but she's just got like terrible writer's block. She can't finish the book. And so her agent, who I thought her agent was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a good job.
Oh, yeah.
So her agent is like, you need to get out of, I think it's New York, you need to get out of the city. And so he schedules this giveaway for a fan to have her come and speak. And it turns out it's a little girl from New Britain, Maine, and it turns out that's where she's from. So she's like, I don't want to go back to my hometown. And she starts telling the story about why she left. And evidently, there's these magic cookies that the recipe was found in this, what would you call it? Like covey, this compartment
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds about right.
in the house. And so they make the cookies and you put it under your bed, under your pillow, and you dream of the person that you are supposed to be with. And I thought that was a pretty clever idea. I didn't know that it was based on lore, like we just found out. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was very good.
That is a very interesting thing. Yeah, I wonder also, like, I was looking at on Letterboxd, when you click on director, this director, Mark Jean, it sorts it by most popular of his films, and two of the top four are Hanukkah related movies. And I'm wondering if this guy's Jewish, or if he's where he's coming from for making a
Yeah,
Christmas movie
we haven't
here.
interviewed him, but he very well could be. There's lots of people who work on Hallmark movies that are Jewish, ironically. That's kind of a funny dynamic.
Yeah, because I usually even think of Kismet as almost like a thing that Jews kind of talk about a lot more than anybody.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, so it's kind of like blending cultures a little bit.
And Mary Lou Henner, even though I don't think she's actually Jewish, she's been in a lot of the Jewish movies.
Oh,
She's
yeah?
been in Hitch for the Holidays, and she's in the Love Lights Hanukkah. So they like her in these movies. Which why wouldn't you? She's delightful.
She's great.
So we have these special cookies, and I thought it was very sweet where Mary Lou Henner, her husband had passed away, and she was still kind of grieving, and she wanted to eat the cookies so that she could have a dream about her husband. That was very sweet.
Yeah, it was a nice moment, and there's a lot around the cookies. It all kind of works in like this kind of way, like the very sweet holiday movie kind of way. It all works.
Yeah. So what happened with the problem with the cookies? The problem with the cookies is that she decides, despite the advice of her Nana, she decides to put the cookie under her pillow, and she's like supposed to be like 18, 19, something like that, like young, and or maybe even younger. I don't know. She's around that age.
Yeah.
And so she puts it in her, and she dreams of her neighbor that's her best friend. So she thinks, who's I think 3 or 4 years older than her. So she dreams of Travis, her neighbor, and she runs over there to tell him that she had this dream, and he's literally getting married right there in his house.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma. Which it does seem unlikely that if they were as close as they make it seem like, that she would have no idea that he's
Right.
about to get married or getting married.
Yeah. That is a very strange thing for her to not know ahead of time, but, you know.
But it's devastating, terrible. And she comes home and she tears up the recipe. So evidently she can't have love. Nobody else can have love.
Mm, yeah.
She
That's not
tears it
very
up.
Christmassy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a very complicated recipe.
Yeah.
And it looked like it had like some kind of filling in it.
Mhm.
So maybe that's why it's complicated, because there's like the pastry and then the filling. So now that it's been ripped up, they have no more Kismet cookies. She ruined it.
Rash decisions.
Yeah, I was like,
Never
wow,
helps.
calm down.
Mhm.
Uh, so then they zoom up to modern time, and they have her presenting at the town. They have Dickens in the park. And it turns out that Travis's daughter is a big fan of her books,
Yeah.
and she's the one that won the prize.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of this little girl? Do you think she was cute, a good kid actor?
Yeah, I thought that she did a good job. I mean, she seemed, you know, she seemed the right amount of excited about meeting this lady and, wanting, like, befriend her in a way and, like, get to know her.
Yeah, her name's Ruby Tupper, and she's been in a bunch of these made for TV movies. And she is, well, I shouldn't say she's been in a bunch, but she was in one last year called A Christmas Miracle for Daisy, and she was really cute in that. And I thought she was really cute in this, and so yeah, she was the right amount of kind of energy, and then yeah, we find out he calls her Sarah Bear.
Mhm. Yep.
And he's dressed up as Santa, which is always a good sign in a
Yeah.
Hallmark movie. If your
Oh,
lead
yeah.
is dressed up as Santa at the beginning, you know he's a
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
good one. He's not a bad man of business.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone dressed as Santa, there's good stuff happening.
Right. It's a good sign.
Yeah.
And there was definitely I liked a theme of friendship in this movie, and then also like a theme of loneliness,
Mhm.
and what she wouldn't have written the books if she hadn't been in this sort of lonely state, and like how we treat our friends, and the kind of a thing, which was a nice, like they were more friends really than they were even romantic interests for most of the movie.
Sure, and I mean, aren't the longest lasting relationships kinda built that way
Yeah.
anyway, so kinda makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, so we have Miss Patsy, and she makes like the most amazing candy. And of course, the secret ingredient is love. But
Mm.
she has a big crush on the town mayor, and she's like giving him fudge and everything. And so she wants to have a Kismet cookie because she wants to know for sure whether she should be with this mayor, or she should pursue this mayor. But they don't have the recipe, so there's no hope for love.
Right, right.
Yeah. And we find out, of course, that Travis's marriage didn't last long,
Yeah.
just long enough to have his daughter.
Well, he didn't have Kismet cookies, so, I mean,
Yeah,
of
he
course.
didn't, or he didn't listen to the Kismet cookie.
Right.
Uh, so I liked that we found out her big inspiration is Wrinkle in Time,
Mhm.
and that I guess her first book that she ever wrote was a Wrinkle in Time fan fiction.
Yeah.
That was
Yep.
fun.
That was, absolutely.
Have you ever read Wrinkle in Time?
I haven't, and I haven't seen the movie either. Like, I remember when the trailers were out. Um, who made that? That was,
Disney.
yeah, it was like 3 years ago or so, right? 3, 4
Yeah,
years
it
ago?
wasn't very good, unfortunately. I do think that the book is kind of unfilmable. I mean, it just the world building and the so much of the movie is about her inner growth, Meg's, as she becomes stronger and braver and more independent through the story.
Mhm.
But it's so easy to sort of focus on these fantastical worlds when really that's not the point of the story.
Right.
And so they took out the heart of the story, and they replaced it with just, it looks pretty, but the exposition is just not great. I don't
Lots
know.
of
It was
green
just
screen.
very disappointing.
Yeah.
But
Well, I liked, like, there's the whole, like, was it like a trivia night or something they were at, and they're, mentioning other Christmas classics, which that was fun. I mean, as a outsider looking in with this movie, it was fun getting all those references. I'd like to take part in a trivia night like that.
yeah. Then they have they have the night at the library where he recites Christmas Carol
Mhm.
as Santa, and he says, "We need all the kismet we can get." And he says, "I'm your oldest friend. You could never break the connection to me." And uh, the agent calls and threatens to bring in a ghostwriter if she doesn't finish this book.
Mhm.
So things are getting pretty tense.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And that is kind of the trajectory of a lot of, writer-based movies.
Yeah. And he works for the Forestry Service.
Mm.
And they have this whole, I guess, I'm not sure exactly where this is supposed to, I guess it's Maine. It's supposed to be Maine.
Mm.
But there's lots of scenes down by like the harbor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly Northeast.
Mm-hmm. And the daughter's name is Jazzy. And she's invited to a sleepover at one point. And he says that we find out that evidently a necklace is gateway jewelry that for a romance. He'll go straight to the diamond ring after the necklace. So be prepared, ladies. If you get a necklace,
Right.
that
Absolutely.
was
Got to
funny.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, and then they have the trivia, like you were saying. They go pick out a Christmas tree. And there was some funny writing I thought in this when they were talking about chopping down the tree thingy.
Mhm. Yeah. No, there was some good moments like that.
Yeah. And also just a little funny moment I thought was when he gets his gloves out of the glove compartment. She's like, "You actually keep your gloves in the glove compartment?" I was
Yeah,
like,
that's
I
pretty
don't know,
good.
that made me laugh.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that is
Yeah.
pretty good.
She's like, "Who does that?" I also love in rom-coms when I call it the movie fall, where they'll be sometimes on like a subway or some things where they fall and they always just land like perfectly kind of on top of each other or in each other's arms. And
Sure.
you had that here
Mhm.
where she trips like getting the tree and she falls right into his arms and they look at each other and they have that like awkward moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that. Live for that.
Yeah. Well, I know it's silly, but like, like I said, with this kind of movie, you want it to be a movie that has like those movie moments.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, I can't ever think of a time when that would actually happen,
No.
but I love it so much.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine being like on the subway or whatever? And, oh, I've fallen right into your arms.
Yeah. Someone would break something probably.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies. So he's got this like slightly creepy cabin in the woods that I think could easily be a horror movie in a different story. This cabin in the woods that his great uncle used to own, and he inherited it. And he's like, you are going to write your book on pen and paper, I think. She didn't even have her laptop. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I know. How is that going to happen in this day and age?
Yeah. But I also liked when he's like, I have a daughter. I do crafts. That was funny.
Yeah.
Did you think they had chemistry? What do you think?
Yeah, I thought so. They had a good, like you said, it's more friendship than anything, but like it worked though.
Yeah, I think so. And so we find out that I guess Nana is considering selling the house, and she wants to go and teach English abroad. And she says that Sarah says, or what was her name? Sarah. So Sarah says, I don't want a stranger living here. I want you living here. And then they say, well, what if the cookie was actually right? All this time she's been assuming it was wrong, but what if it was actually right?
Yeah. What if that cookie was right all those years ago?
Yep. And so they find the recipe all taped up in the covey. And so she makes the cookies. She gives one to Patsy, and Jazzy takes two of them. And so we find out that he used one of the cookies and he dreamed of her, which is really cute.
Yeah. It all comes together.
And she's, of course, able to write because she's love. So she writes. So she writes her book, and everybody loves it. And Benny loves it. And he says it's spectacular. Then we have, she gives the book to Jazzy, and then they say, oh, well, she went to the airport, and they're all like, oh no. And I thought we were going to totally get the like classic rom-com, like run to the airport scene, which is so hard to pull off now because of all the security and
it doesn't even make sense in today's world. That's like not even a thing.
Yeah. But I still love it when they do it. But no, she's there. She was just dropping off Benny, which Benny evidently is a super busy guy to have to leave on Christmas. I think he'd just stay. But she wasn't going to the airport. She decided to stay around. And then they say, of course, I dreamed of you again. It's such kismet.
It's kismet. It's actual kismet.
So I enjoyed this a lot. I thought it was very cute. I liked the leads. I liked the little girl. I liked Mary Lou. It's hard. I feel like I'm always a little bit more generous this first weekend because it's like, I've been in a drought of Christmas movies, and now they're here, and so I'm always a little bit nicer. This first weekend. That last weekend, I'm like, ugh. But sometimes they save their best ones for that last weekend. They really do. So,
Well, I have a feeling this will stay as my number one, considering I probably won't watch any others. But I still really liked it, though.
Yeah. So we'd go 1 to 5 crowns on this podcast. What would you give? You can do parts if you want, like 3.5 or 4 or whatever.
I'm gonna go. I feel like I should like grade on a curve here, like like a little bit different than I maybe would elsewhere. Like I feel like here it's a 4, whereas like on my personal letterbox I went 3. But it's good though. It's definitely good.
Yeah, I don't give stars on Letterboxd for the made-for-TV movies because I just feel like, because then people are going to be like, oh, you gave a 3 to Batman and you gave a 3 to Hallmark movie. I'm like, they're totally different worlds, different
This was about on par with the
Yeah.
Batman. So,
Okay. So I don't know. I don't give them reviews. I mean, I give them reviews. I don't give them ratings.
yeah.
But I would give this a 4. I thought it was a real nice little sweet movie with some
Mhm.
creative magic. It was a little silly, a little funny. So yeah, I would give it a 4. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies. Well,
Let's talk about We Need a Little Christmas.
Right.
And this was on Hallmark Movies and Mysteries. And it stars Eric Durance and Patrick Sabongai. And it's Julie is juggling being a single mother to a grieving child and facing her first Christmas without her husband when she develops an unexpected friendship with a neighbor. And this also, the neighbor is actually Lynn Whitfield.
Yeah.
And I think that Lynn Whitfield is the strength of this movie. I thought she was really good. She brought it. She elevated it. She was warm, lovely. I'm not like, I mean, I've seen her and stuff, of course, but I was like, wow, she's really good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, she makes this movie. Without her, it's just, it's very bland without her, but
Yeah.
she definitely stands out in a really big way.
Yeah. And I also thought the little boy was really cute.
Okay.
You didn't, there was a little too much.
A little too much, I've thought. But I mean, to be fair though, I mean, it's par for the course for, a Christmas movie, of course, but I felt like this kid, give him an inch, he's going to take a mile. You know what I mean?
I thought he was really cute. I enjoyed him, but yeah, they had 2, I think, pretty good kid actors in these movies. And Patrick Sabongai, I enjoy him. I've actually interviewed him.
Oh, cool.
He, I think he is pretty charming. They didn't do a ton with him or his character. He was just kind of there, but I do think he has a winning charisma.
Man, looking at him on Letterboxd, he's been in so many big action movies. It's insane.
Yes.
And then he's doing these Christmas things. Like that is a very varied career for sure.
Yes, he's even in this weekend's Black Adam.
Oh yeah.
Perfect. So, yeah, he's done a lot of different stuff, and he is really charming and a nice person, and I enjoy him in these movies. So keep doing them, please.
Absolutely.
Don't get taken away from us by DC.
Yeah, right.
But really, Lynn Whitfield was the star. She was great, and it was nice to see that this movie really was barely about romance. This movie was about this family, and so her husband has passed away. She has a grandson named Miles who is in like Guam or someplace like that. He's on an island for the military, for the army, I think. And he's a doctor, I think, for the army on some island. And so she misses him so much. And so we also have Eric Durance and her son, who they've just lost their father the year before. And so her idea is that she's going to try to do all of these things that they did as a family just to keep the memory alive.
Yeah.
which makes sense, and why you would try to do that, but it kind of
Mhm.
backfires on her.
Right, right. And if there's a positive with this movie that I would say is, I mean, it's a very relatable thing for any family that tries to, keep some of
Hmm.
the traditions alive after, a major change or something like that.
Yeah. And Irene says at the beginning, she says, holidays aren't the same without children around. And I think that is definitely true. That it's just not the same. Like when I'm with just my parents compared to if nieces or nephews or people like that are there. My nieces are all pretty old now, but there's just something about the holidays with kids that makes it way more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's who it's for, right?
Hmm. Hmm. What do you think of this day camp that he goes to? You think that looked fun?
I mean, I went to a day camp when I was a kid,
Yeah,
and
holiday themed. Sign me
yeah,
up. That looked great.
yeah,
um, and so Patrick Swayze's character, he is a restaurant owner, and so he hires Eric Durance's character. I forget her name. Hires her to renovate the restaurant.
yes,
And so they end up spending time together. He makes her yummy food, and it's cute. And then when he finds out, because he knows Irene and they're friends too, and he finds out about that Miles isn't able to come, and so his character is really sort of the hero of the movie. He makes
mhm,
everything happen,
yeah.
which
Well,
is
the
very
hero
sweet.
of the movie is the food. Let's
Yeah,
be
the
clear.
food.
There's a lot of food in this movie, and it all looks really good.
Yeah, it really does. And I thought that there were some really sweet scenes, like the scene between Irene and the little boy, where he says, "I get sad sometimes. My dad isn't going to be here for Christmas," and she says, "Sometimes the best thing is to say it out loud."
Mhm.
I thought that was a very sweet scene.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm. And he says, "Sometimes doing all the stuff we did with Dad just makes me sad."
Mhm. I mean, and that goes back to that relatability, I think, of this particular story.
And he says, "I don't want to hurt her feelings," which I mean, I think that's always like a very, very endearing quality when a child has to kind of almost parent the parent a little bit. It's probably not the
Sure.
most healthy thing, but it's
Yeah,
it's very it tugs at the heartstrings.
absolutely.
So we find out that Irene has this magic show, and that she wants them to go. She's Irene the Great. It's cute. I mean, I appreciated that because we've seen so many of the same traditions, the tree cutting scenes, the cookie baking scenes, things like that. And so I felt like they tried at least to kind of think of something new, which is hard to do when there's been like 400 of these movies.
Sure.
They have a
Yeah,
Christmas
absolutely.
magic show.
Yeah.
And then she talks to Erica's character and says, Irene, and says that I felt alone when my husband got sick. Eventually, I had to trust people around me. It took a whole village to raise Miles.
Mm.
And then we find out that she has this box of memories of her husband, and they decide to. So the little boy decides to make a Christmas box for his mom,
Right.
like Irene has. And I thought that totally paid off for me when he gives his mom the box. I thought that I had all the feels.
It was played very well.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't, like, do that much for me personally, like, it was like, this was played very well.
Yeah. He says, "You never know when a total stranger will walk through your door and change your life for good." Very sweet. Very sweet.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say this whole movie. I mean, most Hallmark movies are sweet, but this movie I thought was very endearing, very sweet. And then Julie, that's her name, Julie. She's like worried about starting a new relationship. She's very insecure. And I mean, that makes sense because it's only been a year
Right.
then to start a new relationship. I mean, they didn't end this movie off with a kiss. I kind of wish they had, but I understand why they didn't because it's only been a year.
See, and that kind of goes to like with the other one, we're talking about like magical realism and like it being like a movie, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like this one kind of feels grounded in a way where it's
Mhm.
like, you know, I want it to be raised up a little bit.
A little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they made the the little boy's name is Gavin. So he makes the memory chest for his mom, and then Peter, Patrick Swayze's character, he goes and picks up Miles for the connection he has a friend who has a crate, a has a packing company, cargo company.
Yeah.
So they're able to get him off the island. And that, I mean, that's going to bring the feels when Irene sees Miles. It's
Sure.
very sweet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he says, they say, when you have a memory chest, you can have your loved ones with you forever and you don't have to worry about losing them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very sweet.
Yeah.
And I think overall there was a really nice spirit of friendship in this movie between Irene and Julie, Irene and Gavin, between Peter and Julie. I mean, just between everybody. That was the emphasis as opposed to romance. And like I said, there's not even a kiss in this movie.
Right.
And she gives him a present, and she's fixed his clock that he had. That was his grandpa's clock. So that was very sweet.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, to the synopsis of the movie, I mean, it does focus in on the friendship, like, you know,
Mhm.
so like it makes sense that that's where this movie goes. It is all about the friendships.
Yeah. They had her wearing a lot of purple, which I thought was interesting. I mean, this is a total nitpick, but usually in Christmas movies, they're wearing red or green. Or some kind of metallic. Sometimes you see, sometimes they wear blue, but I prefer red and green. But I was like, they have her in
Interesting.
purple almost this whole movie, which I thought was funny.
Interesting. This is a genre where color schemes are like, you know, an important puzzle piece.
Yeah, they do have her in one red outfit at the end. And what was funny to me, and this is kind of stuff only I care about, but when she's in the red outfit, then they have Irene in purple. I was like, costume designer love purple.
Yeah. Yeah.
We sometimes count the number of suit coats that we sometimes count the number of coats that they have the heroines in these movies in.
Nice.
There weren't that many in this one, but they were both purple, and sometimes you'll have like Lacey Chabert movies usually have like 4 or 5 different coats.
Sure. Yeah, you gotta show those things off. It's like a living catalog.
Yeah. So I did enjoy this movie. I thought it was very warm-hearted and endearing. I do like Kismet better just because it was a little sillier and a little more fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought they were both solid, especially because of Lynn Whitfield. And
Yeah.
I hope she does more because she's a really good actress.
Yeah, no, like I said, she definitely elevates this. And while I didn't like it as much as a movie, I think it's all like very well intentioned.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a good representation of, you know, friendship during the holidays. And so like it's worthwhile. Just maybe not as much for me as the other one.
Yeah. I would probably give this one a 3.5 out of 5
Okay.
crowns.
All right. Well,
So less than Kismet, but
if I'm sticking to my my curve, I'd go, I guess, 3, whereas I went 2 on Letterboxd. But you know, it's not.
yeah. Well, let us know what you think if you're listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments of what you thought of these 2 movies. And we're going to have the other 2 movies of the weekend also airing today. So that we're going to have Betsy from Hallmark Happenings on for those two. So you definitely want to check that out. And thanks so much for coming on and talking about these movies with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me, and it's fun to get outside of my comfort zone a little bit here and there, you know?
Yeah. So where can people find you and your podcast and everything?
Well, you can find Piecing It Together wherever you're listening to this podcast, most likely, and follow us on social media at PiecingPod. And you can find my music. My website is bydavidrosen.com, or just go search wherever it is you listen to music for David Rosen, and I will show up with all my albums.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. And make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all over social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews for both of our podcasts. That would really help us out a lot, especially during this Christmas season, for people to find us. So please put your 5-star reviews in. It would be so helpful. And then we also, if you are listening on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that. We also have our merch store, which has tons of fun new festive designs to get you ready for the holiday season. So check that out. And also, we have our patron group, which we have really fun events for the patrons. We have watch-alongs, Q&As from stars. It definitely is worth your while, so please take a look at that. And thanks so much, everybody. We'll talk to you later, and Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas.